Hey guys, welcome to Unit 2.5, which is the quadratic formula. Today we're going to talk about what is the quadratic formula and how do I use this formula to find the roots of quadratic equations. So, solving quadratic equation using the quadratic formula. We talked before that the general equation for a quadratic was ax squared plus bx plus c. Now, today we're going to talk about the quadratic formula.
The quadratic formula's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.
There you go, that's the quadratic formula. So, notice where the letters are coming from. In our regular quadratic equation, we have a, b, and c. That's the same b, a, and c that you see here. You must get equation equal to 0 before you can determine the a, b, and c. So it has to be in this form, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. We use a quadratic formula when something cannot be factored. However, it always works for any quadratic equation. So remember we did our x method and we will find two numbers that multiply to get the top and then add it to the bottom. Now we use this when we can find those two numbers, but it will always work regardless of what quadratic equation I'm working with. So let's see how this works. You know, as always, this is already equal to 0, so I don't have to do anything. What's my a, what's my b, and what's my c? Now that's my quadratic formula. I'm going to substitute a, b, and c. When I substitute it, it looks something like this. My b is, notice that it's minus b, so it's minus parentheses negative 8. Now what you're going to do is everything under this radical sign you're going to put in your calculator and you should get 12. Keep the radical sign and we know negative and then negative make it a positive and it becomes a plus or minus square root of 12 over 2. Now this is where we can simplify the radical. So you break the radical down. To break the radical down, we look for two numbers. When I multiply it, I get 12, but one of them has to be a perfect square. So remember, a perfect square is 4, 9, 16, 25, just same numbers. When I multiply it, I get that number. So 10 times 10 would be 100 is a perfect square. So now we just rewrite this as x equals 8 plus or minus 2 radical 3 over 2. And that, notice here, I can divide by my denominator. 2 goes into 8 and 2 goes into 2. So if I divide by my denominator, I get x is equal to 4 plus or minus square root of 3. And that, I'm sorry, is the roots of the quadratic. That's all it means. You can even actually write this as 4 plus radical 3 or 4 minus radical 3. Either way works. Now let's see here. We have example 2. Since the quadratic equation rounded to the nearest tenth, it's already equal to 0, my a, my b, and my c. That's my quadratic formula. You will need to memorize this. Minus b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Remember that little song? Substitute my values. I will get, remember, put all of this in your calculator, everything under the radical sign. You will get 12 plus or minus square root of 28 over 2. Since we're solving to the nearest tenth, I don't care about simplifying this. I just need to break these up. So we have 12 plus the square root of 28 over 2, and we have 12 minus the square root of 28. Be careful when typing this into your calculator. I recommend that you type the numerator, then hit enter, then do the denominator. Or you can enter all together, just be careful. When you do this, you want to round this to the nearest tenth. You should get 8.64. That rounded to the nearest tenth, look up here, is one decimal place, so this becomes 8.6. And when I do this side, I get 3.35, which is rounded to 3.4. And those are my roots of that quadratic. Now here we're asked to factor this quadratic, leave it in simplest radical form. So we'll have to simplify. My a is 3, my b is 0 because I don't have an x term. My c is negative 5. Quadratic formula. Substitute in here. Remember, put everything here in my calculator. 0 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 5. Simplify that radical because I want to find it in simplest radical. So I look for two numbers. 4 times 15 is 60. Good. 4 is a perfect square, which is 2 radical 15. This becomes, well, we don't care about 0 because if we add 0 to anything, it's the same thing. So I just leave it as plus or minus 2 radical 15 over 6. Good. Divide it by the denominator if you can. Since I can't, I divide by the GCF. I just reduce this. 2 goes into 6 3 times. So I have plus or minus square root of 15 over 3. And that's my final answer. Those are my roots. Okay? Let's see how this works again. All we're doing is substituting value. Solve this to the nearest tenth. Now, be careful, this is not equal to 0, so I need to make it equal to 0. So I'm going to minus 10 on both sides, and I'm going to left with x squared minus 10x plus 8 equals 0. Now I can tell my a, b, and c. Substitute it into my quadratic formula. I get something that looks like this. Notice I kept my b in parentheses because it's negative. Everything under my radical sign is 68. And now it wants it to the nearest tenth. So I don't care about substituting this, simplifying this. So let's work this out. Remember, it's 10 plus the radical 68 over 2, or 10 minus radical 68 over 2. Doesn't matter if I put plus first or minus first. Nope. Plug this in your calculator. Remember, to get a fraction is control and the division sign. Nearest tenth means 1 decimal place, so it's 9.1. This one becomes 0.87, which is actually 0.9 rounded. Those are my roots. I think there's one more. 5. Solve the quadratic equation and round it to the nearest tenth. Now I need to distribute. First thing, but it's still not equal to 0. So I'm going to minus 1 on both sides. Now my quadratic is equal to 0. I can tell my a, my b, and my c. Quadratic formula. Substitute my values. Everything under my radical sign goes in the calculator. I get 6, because it's 2 negatives makes a positive, plus or minus square root of 48 over 6. But I want it to the nearest tenth, so I have to split this up. 6 plus radical 48 over 6, or 6 minus radical 48 over 6. Put this in the calculator. I get the first one, I get 2.5. Rounded to the nearest tenth is 2.2. This should actually be a 2.2. Whoopsie. Not 1, but a 2.2. 2.2. That looks hideous, but you know what I mean, 2.2. Let's do the second part of this. It becomes x is equal to negative 1.5, and this is rounded to negative 1.2. Be careful how you round it. See, I made a mistake here. This is 5, so that means this number that I'm looking at goes up by 1. So this becomes 2.2. And those are going to be the roots of my equation. Now, what you're going to do is just practice working on this quadratic formula. Check in with Miss Ewing or myself if you need help. And remember,
the quadratic formula's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.
alrighty, there you go. Remember, sing the song if you forgot what it is.